but just to try to stick with the concepts. I want to review with you what we saw yesterday. The Gemara had started with raising a contradiction. The contradiction is that the first one line in the Mishnah says that if a person takes a vow that he's not going to eat, and then he eats something inedible, so he's not in violation of his Shavuot. The next line of the Mishnah had said that if a person takes a vow that he's not going to eat, and he eats treif, then he is in violation of his Shavuot. According to the Chachamim, and Reb Shimon disagrees and says that he's patur, he's not in violation. So the Gemara's question was, well, what's the difference? Isn't inedible including things that you're not allowed to eat? So that's what the Gemara's question was. Why is it that in the first case, you're saying that you're patur, you haven't violated the Shavuot, and in the second line, you're saying that according to the Chachamim, you have violated the Shavuot. We're talking in both cases about eating something that you're not permitted to eat. So the Gemara's initial answer was, Ha bistam ha b'mefarish. In the first case, you just said, I'm not going to eat. And because you said, I'm not going to eat, you only were generically referring to food that you're permitted to eat. And therefore, by eating something that's prohibited, you're not in violation. The second line of the Mishnah is b'mefarish, where you said explicitly, I'm not going to eat treif. Since you said explicitly, I'm not going to eat treif, you meant to dafka assign the shavua to eating treif, and therefore by eating treif, you're in direct contradiction to the shavua, and you're in violation. Okay, so far so good. Then the Gemara asks another question. The Gemara says, but wait a minute. How can a person have a shavua that he's not going to eat treif set in upon a pre-existing shavua that happened at Har Sinai? If you're telling me that a person's taking a shvuah that he's not going to eat treif, well, he's already forsworn from the events at the giving of the Torah at Har Sinai. Hashem already made us swear that we're not going to eat treif. So how can a new shvuah set in on top of a pre-existing shvuah? Answers the Gemara two answers. One from Rabbi Yochanan and one from Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan says, a new shvuah can set in on a pre-existing shvuah using the principle of Isser Kolel. Right? Isser Kolel. Okay? What does that mean?
That's what I was going to ask.
It means that if with the new shvuah I include other substances that were not included in the previous shvuah, the new shvuah can therefore set in and add an additional prohibition, even on the substance that was included in the first shvuah. So, the first shvuah was that I'm not going to, that we were told by Hashem we're not allowed to eat treif. This guy says, in his new shvuah, I'm not going to eat bacon or eggs. I'm not going to eat kosher and non-kosher. So therefore, since he's prohibited upon himself kosher food, which was not included in the original Har Sinai shvuah, it can also apply to something that was already prohibited by the Har Sinai Shvuah, which is treif. That's the answer of Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish gives a totally different answer. He says the reason why the Shvuah can set in is because when a person swears that he's not going to eat treif, he's not saying that he's not going to eat a kazayas of treif. He's not going to eat even the smallest amount of treif. The Torah only prohibits eating a kazayas of chazer. And this guy is swearing that he's not going to eat even less than a kazayas of chazer, and that's the reason why the shvuah can take effect, because it's entering into the domain of something that was not prohibited by the Torah. So those are two answers. The Gemara had then asked the question, why doesn't Rabbi Yochanan subscribe to Reish Lakish, and why doesn't Reish Lakish subscribe to Rabbi Yochanan? And the reason why Rabbi Yochanan doesn't subscribe to Reish Lakish is because Reish Lakish would have to say that according to the Chachamim, you have to specify that I'm not even going to eat less than a kazayas, and that's not the implication, that's not the import of our Mishnah. And according to Reish Lakish, the reason why Reish Lakish does not subscribe to Rabbi Yochanan is because Reish Lakish holds that an Isser Kolel only works to apply a new Shavua on a pre-existing Shavua if it happens as an act of God, ipso facto, by itself automatically. And the example that is given is that if a person eats nevela on Yom Kippur, if he eats carrion on Yom Kippur, not only is he in violation of eating nevela, which is the pre-existing Isser, but he's also violated Yom Kippur by eating food on Yom Kippur that's non-kosher. What about the fact that there was a pre-existing Isser? Because Yom Kippur is an Isser kolel. It prohibits not only nevela, but it prohibits all food. And therefore it sets in, that prohibition of Yom Kippur sets in on top of the Isser of nevela when he eats the nevela. But that's an act of God. That's something that happens as defined by Hashem, that on Yom Kippur you can't eat. But something that's man-made, such as a Shavua, even an Isser Kolel will not set in upon a pre-existing prohibition. Now, that brings us to where we are now on Daf Chavdalad, second line. So the Gemara says, Bishlam l'Reish Lakish mishamachi kapata Reb Shimon. I can understand, according to Reish Lakish, why Reb Shimon says that if you swear that you're not going to eat nevela, and you end up eating nevela, so according to Reb Shimon, you are not in violation. Why? Because the Tanya Reb Shimon Omer Kol Shehu Lamakos V'lo Amru Kazayis Elo Lekarban. Remember, what was Reish Lakish's position? He says because the reason why your Shvuah takes effect, according to the Chachamim, is because the Torah only prohibits a Kazayis of Chazer. And your Shavua is going on even less than a Kazayis of Chazer. But Reb Shimon doesn't hold that way. Reb Shimon holds that when the Torah prohibits Chazer, it prohibits even a molecule of Chazer. The only time that there's this concept of a shear, of a minimum measurement of consumption, is only for liability of bringing a carbon, if you did it b'shogeg, but not as far as the prohibition. So therefore, according to Reb Shimon, my Shvuah can't take hold. And that's the reason why I'm going to be potter if I eat the chazer. Elul Reb Yochanan, my time at the Reb Shimon de potter. But the question is, but according to you, Reb Yochanan, who holds that it works using an Isser Kolel, why does Reb Shimon hold that you're not in violation? So the Gemara answer is Midi hu taima ela mishum Isser Kolel. Reb Shimon letaime de lesle Isser Kolel. The answer is because, quite simply, Reb Shimon doesn't hold of this principle of Isser Kolel, that just because the new prohibition is more inclusive of other things, it therefore sets in upon a pre-existing prohibition. And how do I know that? The Tanya Reb Shimon Omer ha'ochel nevela b'yom ha'kippurim potter. Because Reb Shimon is quoted explicitly as saying that if a person eats nevela on Yom Kippur, he doesn't get kares for eating on Yom Kippur. He only incurs a violation for eating nevela, but the prohibition of eating on Yom Kippur does not set in on that piece of nevela. So you see that Reb Shimon doesn't hold of Isser Kolel, just that because Yom Kippur is more inclusive, it sets in. It doesn't set in. Fine. Bishlam Reish Lakish mishkachas la b'lav v'hein. Ela Reb Yochanan bishlam alav mishkachas la elahein heichi mishkachas la. So the Gemara's next question is something that requires us to know information that we haven't yet learned. So Rashi fills in the blanks. On tomorrow's daf, we're going to learn a very interesting phenomenon about the laws of Shvuah. In order for a Shvuah to be legally binding, such that if I violate the terms of the Shvuah, I have to bring a korban, the Shvuah has to be reversible. What do I mean by that? By reversible? It means that whatever the Shvuah, if the Shvuah is formulated in the negative, it has to be formulatable in the positive, and vice versa. If it's formulated in the positive, it has to be formulatable into the negative. So for example, if I take a Shvuah that I'm not going to eat today, I also have to be able to take a Shvuah that I am going to eat today. And if I take a Shvuah that I'm not going to sleep today, I have to be able to take a Shvuah that I am going to sleep today. When it comes to these kinds of things. Now, we've established, based on our understanding of the Mishnah, that the case of I'm not going to eat, in the case of treif, is where a person specified that I'm not going to eat treif. Now, here's the problem. Is such a shvuah reversible? Can you say, I am going to eat treif? According to Reish Lakish, the answer is yes, because according to Reish Lakish, what are you saying in the shvuah? I am not going to eat less than a kazayas of treif. And that's why the shvuah sets in. Can you say, I swear that I'm going to eat less than a kazayas of treif? Yes, Because the Torah doesn't prohibit it. The Torah does not prohibit less than a kazayas of treif, so therefore such a shvuah is a legal shvuah. If I swear that I'm going to eat less than a kazayas of treif, then I'm legally bound by that according to the rules of the Torah, such that if I don't eat that half kazayas of treif, I have to bring a carbon.
So in other words, if you want to really enjoy life, you can swear, you can have a less than a kazayas of whatever you want, whatever, you know.
Biblically, midarabanan chatzi shir is aser, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, but according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says that it's using the principle of an Isser Kolel, according to Rabbi Yochanan, we're not dealing with less than a kazayas. We're dealing with, I swear that I'm not going to eat treif and non-treif. So how is that reversible? I swear that I'm going to eat treif? How can such a shvuah possibly set in? It's not. It's a non-reversible shvuah, and that's the problem that the Gemara has. Ella kiderava da amar Rava shvuah shelo ochal ve'ochal afer pater. So the Gemara says, guess what? We're going to have to completely modify our initial answer. Our initial answer to explain the contradiction between the Reisha and the Seif of the Mishnah was the Reisha, which says that you're not in violation, is because you didn't specify. The Seifa, which says that you are in violation, is because you specified that you're not going to eat treif. We're jettisoning that answer. That's not the real answer, because if it was, then we'd have a problem according to Rabbi Yochanan. The real answer between the Reish and the Seifa is that when a person says, I'm not going to eat, he's specifically thinking about things that are edible, period, and is excluding things that are inedible to anybody, such as eating dirt. And that's why if a guy eats dirt, that's what the Mishnah was referring to, he's pater, he hasn't violated the shvuah. The Seifa is talking about, I swear I'm not going to eat, period. He doesn't specify. It's not talking about specifying. He swears, I'm not going to eat. What he's thinking about is, I'm not going to eat things that are consumable to anyone. Which means that included in that shavua is, I'm not going to eat bacon. Because even though I'm not allowed to eat bacon, but a goy can eat bacon, bacon is still a food item. And that's the real difference. Therefore, if a guy goes ahead and eats bacon after swearing that he's not going to eat, so then he's in violation. And now you don't have that problem anymore that it's non-reversible, because we're not talking about a guy who specified that he's not going to eat treif. He just said, I'm not going to eat. Can you reverse that? Of course, you could swear I am going to eat, right? So therefore, it's not a problem. And that's really the difference between the Reish and the Seifa. So now that we're working with this distinction, that there's a difference between eating something totally inedible versus eating something that's non-kosher. So Amar Rav Mori af ana nami tanina konam ishti nehenes li yamachalti hayom va'achal nevelo sutreif shkatzim ramashim harei ishto asuralo. We have a brisa that supports this, that eating non-kosher is considered eating nonetheless. And where do I see that? From the following case. A person says like this, and we saw this on Daf Chaf Beis. Someone says to him, did you eat today? He says, no, I didn't eat anything today. Are you sure? I swear to you, I didn't eat today. And by the way, I'll put it in the form of a neder. If I ate something today, may my wife be forbidden to me. Right? And I won't get any hana'ah from my wife. And then it turns out that we discover that he had a ham sandwich for lunch. So the halacha is, says the brisa, that he's violated his neder, and his wife therefore is forbidden to him, because he did eat. Right. So what do you see from here? That eating treif is still called eating. Right. So hachi hashta hasam keven demi kara achal v'hadar ishtabole chashuve achshave elahacha mi achshave. So the Gemara says that's not necessarily a raya. Because I could argue that for a guy who's a chazer eater already, when he says the word eating, he includes in his mind eating chazer. Because since this afternoon, for lunch, he already had a ham sandwich, he's demonstrated that eating for him is acceptable to eat chazer as well. So therefore, at 5 in the afternoon, when he takes this neder and says, I swear I haven't eaten anything, and if I have, may my wife be forbidden to me, he's including in his own mind eating treif also, because he's already demonstrated that eating treif is acceptable to him. But for a pious, God-fearing Jew to take a shvuah that I'm not going to eat, maybe since he hasn't eaten treif in his life, he's not including eating treif. So you don't have a raya. The Gemara is saying you don't have a raya from that case to prove that when a person swears that he's not going to eat, he means to include that he's not going to eat treif. Okay, let us go weiter. Amar Rava, my time a demandi isle isser koilel, midi dahava a isser moisef. So Rava says, why is it that there's this concept of an isser koilel? In other words, we know that there's a difference of opinion between the Chachamim and Reb Shimon as to whether this principle of isser koilel applies. Remember, what is isser koilel? Even though there's a pre-existing prohibition on this substance, if with this new Shavua or this new phenomenon, like the onset of Yom Kippur, other substances besides this substance are also prohibited, then that new prohibition applies to the old substance as well, and now it has two prohibitions instead of one. So what is the reason for that? It's no different from an Isser Mosif that everyone agrees to. Now what's the difference between an Isser Kolel and an Isser Mosif? So Rashi tells us the difference. An Isser Kolel is where other substances other than this piece in question are additionally now forbidden in addition to this substance which was always forbidden to me. That's an Isser Kolel. An Isser Mosif is where there are no additional substances, no additional items. There's this one item in front of me that's Usser, but now a new prohibition sets in because it adds levels of prohibition. And what I mean by that is, to illustrate, let me give you an example. I have a piece of chaylev. Chaylev is forbidden fat. Now, but it's from an animal that is being offered as a korban. So forbidden fat, chaylev, is usher for human consumption, but it is not forbidden for divine consumption, meaning it can be placed on the altar and offered up to Hashem as a korban. Now, so therefore, if I go ahead and I eat this piece of chaylev right now that's being waiting to be placed on the mizbeach, I get kares for eating chaylev, and also because I've eaten kadshim, I've done an act of me'ilah, which we'll put to the side for a second. But now let's say that the animal is left out and is not offered as a korban until it's after its expiration date. What is the prohibition that now sets into this animal flesh? What's it called?
Nosar.
Nosar. It's called nosar. Now, what is additionally forbidden about this piece of chaylev in question? Up until now, it was only forbidden for human consumption, but not forbidden for divine consumption. But now that it's nosar, it is now additionally prohibited. There's a new prohibition that sets in on top of the prior prohibition, because now not only can a human not eat it, but even it can't be placed on the mizbeach. That's called an Isser Mosif, and therefore it does set in additionally on top of the pre-existing prohibition, such that if I were to take that piece of chaylev and eat it, I would get punished doubly, once for eating forbidden chaylev, and twice for eating nosar. That's when we say that an additional Isser can set in. So the Gemara says that just like an Isser Mosif works, so does an Isser Kolel, even if there's no new added prohibition, because in the case of nevela on Yom Kippur, I wasn't allowed to eat it before Yom Kippur started. I'm not allowed to eat it after Yom Kippur started. There's no new additional prohibition upon this piece of nevela. But since other food substances are now forbidden because it's Yom Kippur sets in upon this piece of nevela as well. It's based on the same principle as Isser Mosif. Uman de potter, de lesle, ki amar Isser Mosif, b'chada chaticha, b'shtei chatichas lo amrina. You have to play with the language a little bit, but the bottom line is that if you don't hold of Isser Kolel, which is Reb Shimon Shita, what's the reason? Because he holds that there's a difference between Isser Mosif and Isser Kolel. Isser Mosif is when we're dealing with one substance in question, the piece of chaylev, like I said before. Only there, because that substance itself has added prohibition, do we say that the new prohibition sets in on top of it. But with an Isser Kolel, there is no new prohibition. It was previously I couldn't eat it, now I can't eat it also. There's nothing new added on top of this piece of nevela, and therefore just because other substances are prohibited in addition to it, does not allow the new prohibition to set in on top of this piece of nevela. Fine, that explains conceptually the difference of opinion. V'amar Rava Laman di Isle Isser Kolel Amar Shvur Shelo Ochal Teinim V'Chazav Amar Shvur Shelo Ochal Teinim V'Anovim Migu Dechayla Anovim Chayal Nami Ateinim. And Rava basically tells us a classic case of Isser Kolel. If you hold of an Isser Kolel, so just be aware that if a person could create two prohibitions on the same substance by using the principle of Isser Kolel. So for example, he took a Shavua, there's a plate of figs right in front of him, and he says, I swear that I will not eat these figs. And then he brings in a plate of grapes, and he says, an hour later, he says, I will not eat these grapes and these figs, or these figs, right? So that's a classic example of Isser Kolel, because now that something new is added in the prohibition, the second Shvuah can set in on top of the first Shvuah. That's an example of Isser Kolel.
Your nuance there of or and, does that make a difference?
No, it's the way that it's using...
And is not adding anything.
Right.
It is adding. You're saying, I'm not going to eat
So
grapes.
Or isn't. One of them isn't.
Because you would just only eat figs still.
That's why I prefer using and. In Hebrew, it translates as and, but in English, we would use the word or. But it's really, so that's why it's confusing. But the point is that his new Shavua is inclusive of, he's prohibiting upon himself both grapes and figs.
But not, when your example, when you started with me saying you brought in a plate of figs, is he saying I'm not going to eat these figs?
It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Don't get bogged down in that.
No.
He's saying he's not eating figs today.
Oh, okay.
And then he says an hour later, I'm not eating grapes and I'm not eating figs.
Because, all right, but that's,
So that's an Isser Kolel. Whether it's these figs or figs generically, it's irrelevant. It doesn't make a difference.
Don't give a fig.
Don't get bogged down. Please,
No.
please. It's complicated enough. Trust me. It's complicated enough. So the Gemara now says Pshita. The Gemara now says, why do you need to point this out to me, Rava? All you've done is just defined a classic example of Isser Kolel. So the Gemara says, Mahu detema Isser haba me'elav amrinan Isser haba me'atzmo lo amrinan kamash malan. It's exactly to deflect Reish Lakish's shita that I mentioned at the beginning of the daf. What did Reish Lakish say? Reish Lakish said that Isser Kolel does not apply to man-made prohibitions. The Chiddush of Rava is we don't agree with Reish Lakish. Even if the second prohibition is man-made, because you elect to place the Shavua upon yourself, it still works using the principle of Isser Kolel. Weiter. Masiv Rava Berei de Rabba. Yesh ochel achila echas v'chayv oleha arba chatos v'asham echad ve'eluhen. There's a brisa that says that a person could eat one kazayas of a prohibited substance, and for that one act, you would be liable to bring 5 karbanos. 4 chatas karbanos, and 1 asham karban. Now what is it? Ve'eluhen. Tamei sha'achal chelev v'hu nosar min ha'mukdashim b'yom ha'kippurim. A guy himself is tamei, and he eats chelev, that is part of a karban, that is nosar, and he eats it on Yom Kippur. Fantastic. Wow, how this guy really wants to rack him up, right? So what are the 4 karban chatas liabilities? Number 1, you're tamei who's eating kachim. Number 2, you're eating chelev. Number 3, you're eating nosar. And number 4, you're eating on Yom Kippur. Those are 4 things for which the liability is a karban chatas. What's the karban asham? Rashi says is you're doing an act of me'ila, right? If you're getting personal benefit out of hektish. So therefore, that's 5 karbanos. Rabbi Meir Omer Afim Haisa Shabbos V'Hotziu B'Fiv Chayav Amru Lo Eno Min Hashem. And Rabbi Meir says I can come up with an additional carbon because if while you're eating it, it's in your mouth, you're carrying it outside, so then you're in violation of Shabbos as well. And the Chachamim say that's not a prohibition of eating. That carbon comes for carrying, not for eating, and therefore it doesn't count. Now, in other words, we're not including that in our inventory. Now, v'im isa mishkachas lachamesh kagon shomer shvur shelo ochal temorim v'chelev migu dechayla temorim chayla nami achelev. So the Gemara says now, if you hold that this Isser Kolel principle works even when it's a man-made prohibition, then I could come up with a 5th carbon chatas. And what is that? where a person had pointed to that piece of chaylev and said, I hereby swear that I'm not going to eat figs, or actually here it's dates, I swear I'm not going to eat dates and chaylev. Right? And so because you have included not only a prohibited substance, but also a permitted substance, that shvuah should set, a new isser should set in upon the chaylev, using the principle of isser kolel. Mm-hmm. So how come the Brisa doesn't list that? Doesn't that prove that isser kolel doesn't work in that instance? So the Gemara says no. Ki katani isser haba me'elav, isser haba me'atzma lo katani. So the Gemara answers no. The Brisa, in making its inventory, only wanted to list prohibitions that are incurred naturally, not through man-made initiative. Meaning that you could create additional isser through man-made initiative of taking a shvuah. But all of the other prohibitions set in on their own because of God's workings, not because of man's initiative. But wait a minute, va'arei hektish. But 1 second, one of the examples is hektish. How does something become hektish? Man-made designation. So what are you talking about? So the Gemara says no. B'bechor diktusha so merechem. The answer is that this Bryce is talking about that it's hektish not because of human designation, but it was born as a firstborn animal, so it's hektish by birth. So Iboy is saying, I'll give you another answer why Isser Kolel is not included here, because ki katani midi de lesle she'ela, shvua de isle she'ela lo katani, that the Bryce is only listing violations that cannot be annulled through going to a Beis Din. But a violation of a shvuah can be annulled. The shvuah could be annulled. The prohibition of the shvuah could be annulled by going and getting a hataras nedarim. And so therefore the Brisa didn't want to list it in the list. But wait a minute, harei hektish. But what about hektish? If you make something hektish, you can also get the hektish annulled. But haukminam bebechor. So we told you, but we answered that already. We're talking about a kedusha that occurs naturally, not through human declaration. Iboy esema. I'll give you another answer. Ki ketani korban kavua korban olavior lo ketani. You know why a shvuah violation is not included in the list? Simply because the Brisa was not interested in listing liability of a korban that is of fluctuable value. The Brisa was only listing the liability of a korban chatas for a korban chatas that is not what we call olaviori, which we've learned before in Masechah Shvuos, that when you violate a shvuah, you bring a korban olaviori, which means depending upon your economic status, you either bring an animal, a bird, or flour, okay, or a mincha. So that type of korban is not part of our inventory. But wait a minute. Harei tami she'achal es hakodesh the korban olaviori. But wait a minute. One of the things listed in the Brisa is for a korban olaviyored, because a person who's tamei, who eats kachim, has to bring a korban chatas that's olaviyored, a fluctuating value depending upon his economic status. So the Gemara says, well, benasi v'Rebbi Eliezer the Amar nasi mevi sa'ir. Our Brisa could be talking about a special case of a tamei who eats kachim, namely he's a nasi, he's a head of a tribe. And the head of a tribe, according to Rabbi Eliezer, who eats tumah, who eats in a kachim in a state of tumah, has to bring a standard korban that is not fluctuating in value, it's fixed value. He has to bring a goat. Okay, Rav Ashi Omar, I'll give you another answer. Ki katani midi dechayla kishir, shvua dechayla apachos mi kishir lo katani. I'll give you another answer. You know why shvua prohibition is not listed in this inventory of karbanos? Because a shvua the Brisa is only listing things for which there needs to be a minimum amount in order to incur the violation. But a shvuah can set in on something that has no minimal amount. It could be even on the tiniest little speck. If a person takes a shvuah that he's not even going to eat a speck of something, so then he can incur a violation. So that's why it's not in the list, because the Brisa was only listing things that have a minimal measurement. But wait a minute, harei hektish. But what about hektish? You can make even a small thing smaller than a kazayas hektish. So the Gemara says, but still hektish has a minimal amount because of inan shava pruta, because it has to be at least a pruta's worth in order for it to be hektish. So let me give you another answer. V'Ravashi me'avira amar Reb Zera ki katani zedano kare zedoni lav lo katani. That a different Ravashi. This is a Ravashi who comes from the town of Avira, which I'm not familiar with this Ravashi. He says in the name of Rebbe Zera that the Brisa was only listing items where if you did them intentionally, you would get kares. But when it comes to violating a shavua, when you deliberately violate a shavua, you don't get kares. You only incur in this a mitzvah lo saseh if you do it if you deliberately violate the shavua, and that's why the brisa didn't list it. But wait a minute, v'harei asham dezadon olavu katani. But wait a minute, what about me'ila? Me'ila is something that if you intentionally do it, there's no kares there either, and yet it's listed as one of the things you have to bring a korban for. So the Gemara answers b'chatas karmina. No, we're only talking about the chatas category. In other words, the Mishnah had said there's 4 karbanos chatas and 1 karban asham. I grant you that the liability to bring a karban asham for me'ila is a prohibition that if you did it intentionally, it's only a mitzvah lo saseh, there's no kares. But the list of chatases, that the violations that you have to bring a chatas for, if you did those things intentionally, you would get kares. And that's why we're not including the violation of a shvua, because if you did that intentionally, you wouldn't get kares. Now, Ravina Omar, I'll give you another answer. Ki katani midi dechai lamidi de barachilahu, shvua dechai lamidi de laf barachilahu lo katani. Another answer, says Ravina. The Brisa is only listing those things where the violation can only set in on an edible item, but not on a non-edible item. But a shavua, you can violate a shavua for both edible items and non-edible items, and therefore that's why the Brisa doesn't list it as one of the karbanos you'd have to bring. But wait a minute, varei hektish l'chayil nami ya'itzim va'avanim. What are you talking about? Something that's hektish? If you consume that, even if it's non-edible, you can be in violation of hektish. Like we know that hektish can set in even on inanimate objects, inorganic and inanimate objects like stones and trees. So ela ki katani midi dechayal amidi de ispa mishasha shvu dechayal amidi de lesbe mishasha kagon sheishan b'shlo ishan lo katani. So Ravina says, you're right, you didn't understand me. What I meant to say is that the Brisa is only listing those things where the violation is done with things that are tangible. But a shvua, you can violate a shvua even for non-tangibles. Now, what do we mean you can violate a shvua for non-tangibles? You don't need a three-dimensional object in front of you in order to incur the violation when it comes to a shvua. Because a shvua can relate to an action or an inaction. It doesn't have to relate to a real object, a tangible object that's in front of you. So, for example, you could take a shvua that you're not going to sleep, or a shvua that you're not going to eat, right? So those things are intangibles, right? And as a result, it's a shavua violation is much more generic or encompassing than the types of violations that are listed in the Brisa. And that's why basically all of these answers are basically saying the Brisa could have listed other things that you're in violation of, but it only limited it itself to karbanos that you would have to bring under specific conditions that fit into a certain category. And since Shavua is beyond that category, it didn't list it. But in Achinami, using the principle of an Isser Kolel, if you were to eat Chalev that already had a second edition of having a Shavua set in upon it, you would taka have to bring an additional carbon of a carbon Shavua. We'll hold it here for today. Have a wonderful Shabbos.